Stream of consciousness is a literary technique that depicts the narrative from the perspective of a character's inner thoughts and emotions. By portraying the uninhibited inner workings of a character, it highlights a more personal sense of voice and provides a greater capacity for audiences to relate with the character. Stream of consciousness often rejects traditional conventions of prose. The technique often subverts conformity through means of an idiosyncratic structure, non sequitur, and unconventional punctuation. These serve to illustrate the nonsensical nature of human thought. By limiting the narrative perspective to a single character's internal view, the audience's perspective can be controlled to subvert traditional literary conventions. It may serve to provide a unique voice or position the audience to perceive events in a certain fashion, such as in instances of unreliable narrators. Stream of consciousness is a device used to varying degrees throughout much of Cormac McCarthy's work. Cormac McCarthy's 10th novel, The Road, published on September 26, 2006, is framed through the narrative perspective of third-person omniscient. However, it often alternates with unexpected lapses into the protagonist's stream of consciousness. McCarthy's writing is characterized by a minimalist style that sees little use of description or punctuation. The narrative follows an unnamed father and son, struggling to survive in the aftermath of an unexplained cataclysm that has plunged the world into chaos, as they face starvation, cannibals, and the challenge of maintaining their own humanity. The internal voice of the man is often detached and morose at the state of existence, changing only in his dreams or in his thoughts of his son or past. The stream of consciousness is juxtaposed against the third-person narration to inform moments of great emotion against the bleak environment. Cormac McCarthy also utilizes stream of consciousness in action sequences. He does this to build a sense of magnitude and a sense of stake to the proceedings, which is further heightened by its juxtaposition against his depiction of mundane events and physical occurrences in third person. Contrary to the third-person narration, stream of consciousness is used as a tool to inspire a sense of mounting tension. In the novel, he describes their travels. They bore on south in the days and weeks to follow, solitary and dogged, a raw hill country, aluminum houses. They crossed the broken asphalt apron and found the tank for the pumps. The cap was gone and the man dropped to his elbows to smell the pipe, but the odor of gas was only a rumor, faint and stale. He stood and looked over the building, the windows intact. The door to the service bay was open and he went in. This is juxtaposed against the scene where they are hiding from searching cannibals. They lay listening. Can you do it? When the time comes? When the time comes, there will be no time. Now is the time. Curse God and die. What if it doesn't fire? Could you crush that beloved skull with a rock? Is there such a being within you of which you know nothing? Can there be? Hold him in your arms. Just so. The soul is quick. Pull him toward you. Kiss him. Quickly. The latter passage establishes stream of consciousness through the use of free direct thought. This is manifested in the man's self-questioning and chastisement about whether he can bring himself to kill his boy. This creates an uninhibited and fundamental link to the emotional mindset of the man. This differs from the use of voice in the former passage, as it does not give any indication of his internal thought process, instead providing clipped observations about immaterial matters as they traverse the wasteland. The use of short sentences here differs from the action sequence, as here it is designed to convey apathy and stagnation, rather than tension. There is no description given to how the man undertakes the actions, compared to the use of adverbs that describe how the man did things quickly. McCarthy's traditionally minimalist writing style, that in the third person invokes a sense of apathy, is subverted when he lapses into first person, and the use of adverbs to give expression and character to the man's actions. Furthermore, McCarthy opts to use literary techniques grounded in repetition to heighten the sense of tension and emotion conveyed by the man's stream of consciousness. The second excerpt implements anaphora through a repetition of the word time, using variants and modulations of whether he can kill his son when the time comes. This repetition is short, sharp, and the use of question and answer escalates to create a sense of chaotic rhythm that emphasizes the increasingly panicked nature of the man's thoughts. The sense of tension is furthered by subsequent use of epistrophe. McCarthy trades the opening of "when the time comes" for the ending "what if it doesn't fire?" This sentiment is then repeated until his answer has created a circular structure that has him once again asking whether he can go through with it. The fact his line of self-questioning has led him back to his initial question propels a mounting sense of tension that crescendos the feeling of panic, as he is still unable to answer his original question. However, this is resolved with the use of a resumptive modifier that takes the final question of "can there be?" a way for him to kill his son, and takes him in a direction where he should show his son love in their final moments, whether he kills him or not. The use of repetition through patterns of anaphora and epistrophe create a circular structure of internal conflict that is resolved through a resumptive modifier, resulting in an intense emotional payoff. Furthermore, the short clipped sentence structure gives a sense of passing thought. This complex structure, conveyed through stream of consciousness, highlights a strong sense of emotion that contrasts starkly against the minimalist third-person narration. McCarthy is also adept at using the language of stream of consciousness against third-person narration as a vehicle to convey emotion and theme. Throughout this text, McCarthy often ends paragraphs by alternating into the man stream of consciousness. In accordance with McCarthy's minimalist writing style, the text gives no grammatical indication of this change, except for a shift to first-person narration. This lack of signposting gives the stream of consciousness sections the effect of seeming like the man has naturally lapsed into thought. His continued use of this technique creates a pattern that breaks the established conventions set through third-person narration. He breaks the patterns of established language in third person through strategically repeating these lapses in stream of consciousness. By isolating said streams of consciousness, it emphasizes its significance to the story. This pattern of language serves to inform and foreground the central theme of carrying the fire. When it was light enough to use the binoculars, he glassed the valley below, everything paling away into the murk, the soft ash blowing in loose swirls over the blacktop. He studied what he could see, the segments of road down there among dead trees, looking for anything of color, any movement, any trace of standing smoke. He lowered the glasses and pulled down the cotton mask from his face and wiped his nose from the back of his wrist, and then glassed the country again. Then he just sat there holding the binoculars and watching the ashen daylight congeal over the land. He knew that the child was his warrant. He said, "If he is not the word of God, God never spoke." The importance of this lapse into stream of consciousness doesn't become apparent until he contemplates. On this road there are no God-spoken men. They are gone, and I am left, and they have taken the world with them. Query: how does the never to be differ from the never was? Using stream of consciousness to foreground that there are no God-spoken men left, despite his son being the word of God, sets them apart from the men no longer God-spoken, and foregrounds the idea that they are carrying the fire. These themes concerning God and morality are only expressed through stream of consciousness, whereas instances of third-person narration use repetition of this grey motif. McCarthy also utilizes leitmotif within his stream of consciousness to convey this. The world shrinking down about a raw particle of entities, the name of things following those things into oblivion, colors, the names of birds, things to eat, finally, the names of things once believed to be true. Leitmotif in this passage focuses on the names of things long gone, which results in a space beyond the immediate narrative, disrupting language conventions to describe the current world, not through what it is, but through what it lacks. The use of leitmotif articulates why outward narration is so minimal, while also informing the later scene where he sat up and felt about for the boy. He held his hand to the thin ribs, warmth and movement, heartbeat. The fact he remembers the names of these in third-person narration says that his son, God's voice, his heartbeat, carrying the fire, have not yet gone into oblivion. By foregrounding why third-person description is so minimal, it elevates the emotional meaning of what he does notice. Expressing the narrative theme of carrying the fire solely through stream of consciousness rather than third-person narration foregrounds the fact that the fire must exist inside of the characters, if the idea is only expressed through their consciousness rather than outward narration. By establishing and subverting language patterns through stream of consciousness and leitmotif, scenes of thematic importance are foregrounded against third-person narration to heighten emotional payoffs and effectively utilize language as a vehicle for theme. McCarthy also utilizes character-specific discourse to further stream of consciousness. The sole stream of consciousness explored is that of the man. Little is known about his character. However, he is characterized by his stance as a father and survivor. Furthermore, his character is informed by the fact he had a life predating the cataclysmic event. When it was light enough to use the binoculars, he glassed the valley below, everything paling away into the murk, the soft ash blowing in loose swirls over the blacktop. He studied what he could see, the segments of road down there among the dead trees, looking for anything of color, any movement, any trace of standing smoke. He lowered the glasses and pulled down the cotton mask from his face and wiped his nose on the back of his wrist and then glassed the country again. Then he just sat there, holding the binoculars and watching the ashen daylight congeal over the land. He knew only the child was his warrant. He said, "If he is not the word of God, God never spoke." The use of colloquial turns of phrase, such as glassing, capture the man's specific diction. the term glassing as a niche term associated with hunting and establishes the character as someone who is accustomed to the binocular's use through survival and potentially hunting. Use of this specific nomenclature sees the character removed from the author's voice and imbued with his own unique sense of voice and experience. This is also demonstrated where, from daydreams on the road there was no waking, he plodded on. He could remember everything of her save her scent. Seated in a theatre with her beside him, leaning forward listening to the music, gold scroll work and sconces, and the tall columnar folds of the drapes at either side of the stage. She held his hand in her lap, and he could feel the tops of her stockings through the thin stuff of her summer dress. Freeze this frame. Now cool down your dark and your cold and be damned. They lay listening. Can you do it? When the time comes. When the time comes, there will be no time. Now is the time. Curse God and die. What if it doesn't fire? Could you crush that beloved skull with a rock? Is there such a being within you of which you know nothing? Can there be? Hold him in your arms, just so. The soul is quick. Pull him towards you. Kiss him, quickly. The author uses free direct thought in the line, freeze this frame. Now call down your dark and your cold and be damned. It is used almost as if it is breaking the fourth wall. While he is saying it to himself, it is delivered in a way that almost like he is telling the reader directly. This serves to offer an emotional punch by further isolating the man's voice from the author's. The use of alliteration in cool, cold, and dark damn offer a musical tone to the man's stream of consciousness, drastically different from the book's standard narration, which furthers the sense of his unique voice. Free direct thought is also characterized by the back and forward of questions and answers posed by the man when he debates killing his son. This emulates the chaotic nature of thought, especially under stress. His internal conflict grounds him as a human character and makes him relatable. The following example is a short story piece designed to embody many of the literary techniques that typify stream of consciousness in McCarthy's The Road. Namely, I have sought to incorporate repetition, anaphora, resumptive modifiers, free direct thought, and character diction. The story follows a bartender at an industry event on his night off, where he runs afoul of an old work colleague. I sought to use repetition to give a sense of the passage of time as the protagonist drinks. Rather than immediately narrating that the character drank 3 beers, I chose to punctuate each passage of time with a thought. This maintains the framing of perspective on the character rather than his actions, to give a tighter sense of focus to the narrative. It also serves to drive the story along in an instance where merely detailing the boring action of drinking a beer may not adequately carry the story. I also utilized anaphora in the character's internal monologue to build a sense of mounting tension in the narrative voice, prefacing every sentence with "every time" foregrounds the incremental increase in frustration that the character is reliving with every memory of his mistreatment. By using anaphora in stream of consciousness, it acts as a device to help build tension in a short space of narrative time. I chose this over external narration because using external narration to convey tension through physical observations in a very brief moment would be more difficult than building tension in an environment such as the stream of consciousness that is not bound by the narrative convention of time. Using stream of consciousness to subvert narrative conventions ultimately provides an unconventional avenue outside these conventions to effectively achieve tension. The use of resumptive modifiers serves to foreshadow events and provide emotional catharsis. When the protagonist considers that drinking is a bad idea, it establishes a pattern of language and thought that is then subverted with a resumptive modifier stating, "I knew as soon as my foot crossed the threshold into Heya, none of that mattered," to foreshadow the coming events. The second instance of resumptive modifier serves as an emotional catharsis to generate sympathy for Claire. The text establishes a repetition of sentences to frame Claire in an unfavorable light. This is subverted by the resumptive modifier, which re-establishes her in a more sympathetic light. Repetition is then used to build this new sympathetic light into a believable change of heart for the protagonist. Free direct thought is utilized to give a specific shape to the voice and thoughts of the protagonist. The shape of thoughts inform the reader of the mindset and emotions the character is experiencing. In these cases, free direct thought acts as a substitute for metaphor and simile. By using the shape of thought and showing how it occurs, stream of consciousness shows, rather than tells the audience, how the character feels. When the protagonist expresses his desire to only have one drink and his subsequent spiel about how it will be more than one, it serves to highlight a sense of wry amusement at his situation and a reluctance to face the inevitability of drinking. Ultimately, it can be said that the stream of consciousness within the Road and my own work is conveyed and utilized in a variety of ways. By utilizing stream of consciousness, it serves to subvert literary norms and achieve an unconventional style.